Welcome back to the Introduction to UDK. My name is Amika L. Cunningham, and I will be your instructor as we move into a little bit of more resources inside of the Unreal Engine today. So, here inside of UDK, I want to talk about something that's very important for every game. For many games, you're going to have an outdoor or an outside landscape or maybe a terrain. And I want to go through how you build that inside of UDK with some of the brand new tools that are available inside of Unreal. So the first thing we want to do is right here on our modes, we want to put this into landscape mode. So I'm going to click on this being landscape mode, and we need to set up the height map size. So we need to set up the size or the vertices, the component size, and the total components. Now, UDK has a quick, surefire way to be able to do this, and I want to post these up on the video description. But there actually is a set number of size that you can set for UDK. Now I know some of these by heart, but what you'll do is you want to go and look on UDN or UDK's website for the knowledge base, which is the UDN. And you'll basically come in here and do it through here. So you'll search through UDN, look at landscape, and it'll bring you to the actual landscape size. So the size of landscape that I want to build right now is a pretty small landscape. I'm going to do this 253 by 253. And what you'll notice is when I type in this number or these two numbers, you'll see it gives me my quads, it gives me how many sections per component, and basically what this is setting up. And when I hit create landscape, what we'll see is we actually have like 4 quadrants, and inside of these quadrants we have our subdivisions, which are, we have our subdivision inside of these quadrants that are set up in here. Now by default this comes in with the base texture that UDK uses. Now what we want to do and what I want to show you is a little bit how we navigate through these tools. And I'm going to save this level out just in case UDK wants to crash, of course, because it does that from time to time. So I'm going to say UDK tester, and I'm going to save this, let it save out. That's good. Let's move this over here. Now one thing I will tell you is if you're using a Wacom tablet, UDK doesn't like the movement of the tablet. It does fine when you're moving with the mouse, but when you do it with the tablet, UDK will go kind of crazy. So if you're using this, you want to make sure that you're using your regular mouse for movement, and then you're using your tablet to be able to deform your surface. So let's talk about how we deform our surface. First things first, inside of our landscape editing, we actually have our paint tools. We have our normal paintbrush, we have a smooth brush, a flatten, an erosion, and then we have this hydraulic erosion, and then we have a noise. Now between the erosion and hydraulic erosion, this would be like wind or other things of that nature kind of banging up against my surface. Now hydraulic erosion is going to be water, wind, all those things that have eroded away the surface over time. Now this also goes into my components and how I set my landscape piece up. The more vertices I put into it, of course, the more topology I have to deform. So keep that in mind too as you build out your landscape. So I'm just going to get my paintbrush, and using my Wacom tablet, I'm using the touch wheel on the Wacom. So I've got this, if you can see this, I've got this in brush mode, and in brush mode I can actually scroll with my wheel and actually change my brush size. So I'm just going to build this up, and you can see I'm building this up. I can change my tool strength. I can turn this up really high. Let's get a bigger brush. So I'm going to bring in like some nice large mountains. Scroll this down, get like a little bit of plateaus up here. Kind of keep pushing these guys up. What I want to have in the end, I want this level to be set up in like this horseshoe shape. So I'm kind of putting in some natural boundaries for my play area. So I'm putting in some of these natural boundaries, and yeah, you have to, like I said, you have to watch out because this thing will go kind of batty on you if you even have your pen near if you have your stylus even near your Wacom when you're moving, it will really want to go haywire. So I'm just using my mouse and positioning my camera. Once I get my camera set up, then I'll go back in here and actually paint. Now, if you're doing this with your mouse, you're going to have to hold down the control key when you paint to make sure that you're painting. If you're doing it with your Wacom, one thing that's kind of cool is the Wacom will actually paint by default. So it'll actually inadvertently know to be able to paint. Now, if I wanted to push this down, of course, I can hold the Shift key, and Shift will lower my painting. So I'm just going to paint this up. So I'll show you how to use these in conjunction with each other. So I'm just painting this up, get this kind of built up. I'm going to get my erosion brush and kind of erode this a little bit. So erode this away. Get my flatten brush and kind of flatten this out. So you can see you actually can get some really cool effects with using these in unison with each other. Get like a little plateau area going on up here. Get my paintbrush, make it a lot smaller, and just kind of lift this up right in here. So I'm just, doing some little fun things with this. I'll get a really, really, really big brush. Let's get this really large and pull up larger mountains. And just kind of pull this stuff up. So I've got my little, stuff sitting in this little valley as sorts. And I can use my erosion and kind of erode this away. It gives like that eroded face. Which, it's kind of cool. You can see the erosion happening on some of my bigger set pieces. I like to keep this because one thing I don't want to do, I'm going to get my scale, I'm going to get my noise for a second. I want to take my noise and kind of use it on the ground because I don't want my ground to be completely flat because there's actually very few places that you can have this completely flat type of, environment. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that I can flatten this out, that I'm not just having, this very unnatural piece. I can get my smooth brush and kind of smooth this out a little bit, smooth out my pieces a little bit more. I'll get my flatten, kind of come back in here, kind of build this down just a little bit, kind of carve into some of this stuff, and let's get in here and see. So I've got like this little valley in here, which is fine. I'll flatten this out so we have somewhere to kind of put our pieces once we get them in here. So this is kind of flat. You really don't want these really big divots cut into your landscape because you can sometimes get hung in those. So you don't want these like huge divots. I just kind of want something where I have like a natural boundary line and it kind of makes sense, honestly. So let's just go through here and just paint these out. So I've got this. This is my landscape so far. So what I need to do is I need to be able to, I'm just go ahead and save this. I need to be able to actually make a texture so that I can paint right onto my surface because I can paint directly onto my surface. So what I want to do is I want to show you how to set those textures up inside of the content browser, how to bring this stuff in, and how to use this stuff inside of UDK. So the first thing I want to do is open up my content browser, and I have a package, so I have my package, and you can see I've got a couple of textures already in here, and I'm just going to start over on these guys. So I'm just going to select everything that's in my current package. I'm going to grab all this stuff. I'm just going to right click on it, and I'm going to say delete force. So I'm just going to force it to delete. I'm going to say yes to all. So I'm going to show you how to set these guys up yourself. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to come in here and import, and I'll go to my desktop and get the folder that I have, and I've got all of the files that I want inside of here. All of these are targas, and some of these are bitmaps images, but you'll notice that UDK will accept bitmap, float maps, PCX, PNG, PSD, and targas. Those are the only ones it will accept for, and actually it'll accept compiled shaders. But usually for textures, it'll only accept bitmaps, float maps, PCX, PNGs, PSDs, and TGA map file formats. So I'm going to hit open for this, and it's going to ask me. All of these are named and labeled, and as always, you have to make sure that you realize that anything that is going to be brought into UDK cannot have spaces. It has to have some type of underscore or something to delineate it. So I'm going to hit OK. That's my diffuse, and it's saying it's not fully loaded. I'm going to let it load. So when it loads my package completely, it's going to be able to save this inside of my package, and it'll go through these guys one by one. Um, and as you know, everything inside of UDK takes a little bit of time. You're going to have to bear with it with the actual building of the shader, because this shader has a lot of little idiosyncrasies inside of it. So this is going to be it's not a difficult shader to build. It's just a very interesting shader once you build this out. Now, one thing I want to pay attention to as I'm importing this stuff, and the reason why I'm not saying OK to all, when I get to these normals, I kind of want to set this up so that this isn't just, a regular map that comes in here. I want to set this up so that it is a normal. And you can do normal, you don't necessarily have to do normal as alpha, but I'm just going to do normal map uncompressed. So now, my compression settings, this is a normal. It's set up to be a normal map, and it's not going to do any kind of funky stuff on this guy, pretty much. So it's set up to be a normal map, and it's good. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And I'm just letting these guys import one at a time, just because I need to go through and make sure that I set my normals and not do that. So let's just go ahead and set this to normal, hit OK. And I'm only going to do this on my normals. I'm not doing this on anything else, just on my normal maps. It basically sets up the compression scheme for normals as they come in, because your normals, if you notice, when you look at your normals, they are this really weird looking type of texture, and you can save a little bit of space by actually compressing those guys. So just so you know that when you're bringing in normal maps, make sure you change your compression settings to actually be for normals. And I'm gonna stop messing with this so it can actually import these guys. I'm just gonna go ahead and say OK to all, because at least you've seen it, and I'll just let it go ahead and import the rest of these guys on its own. And give this a second to import in. Now, something else that you can use inside of UDK, you can also use trees. There is actually the Speed Tree plugin. I will show you how to use the Speed Tree plugin as well. Speed Tree lets you actually paint in trees. You can choose a group of trees and directly paint those onto your landscape inside of UDK, which is actually a very cool process. And once you get the hang of it, you'll love it. It's not that hard to actually understand. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to actually pause this video, and when I come back, hopefully these textures will have imported, and we can continue on with the rest of the tutorial. So here we are back inside of UDK. You can see that my textures have all imported, and if you look at these textures, these guys are actually quite large. They're 2048 by 2048 textures. I've got this stone 3, I've got this stone 5, this is I have stone 3, and I have height maps and normal maps in here for each one of these. So I have like my diffuse, height, and then normal, diffuse, height, normal. I've got something for like a walkway or pavement, so I have the diffuse and and everything for that too. And also have like a ground texture, and another ground texture has like snow caps on top of it. So I've got quite a few textures in here. I'm going to use all of these guys. So I've got like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like 5 textures in here that I'm going to use. So let's start building out the shader network. The shader network is a little complicated, so you're going to have to probably follow along twice with this guy. So I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to right click, I'm going to say I want a new material, and I'm just going to call this ground and hit OK. So it opens up my material editor, and I'm inside my material editor. I want to get my content browser so I can see both of these guys. And the first thing I want to do is start bringing in my ground. So I'm going to drag in this diffuse into my material editor and drop it. And you see it comes in as a texture sample. Another way, an alternative way that you can bring this stuff in is to click on your texture that you want, come into your material editor, hold down the T, like T as in, top key, and just click. Holding down the T key is kind of like a shortcut for texture sample, and whenever you click, whatever you have selected inside of your content browser will get loaded inside of a brand new texture sample node. So I'm going to go ahead and bring in all the rest of my texture nodes. I'm just going to drag these guys in just to make it easier. So drag that in and drag these guys in. Now I will say one program that I really like for texture is Algorithmic Substance. Every one of the textures that I'm using right now are generated inside of Substance. Substance is a procedural based texturing program. These are some substances that I downloaded from their website. The really cool thing about the substances is that they can be resized to any size that you need. Originally, these textures were only 512 by 512. And when I got rid of these guys, when I got ready to use these, I was like, you know what, I want to bump them up to 1024. Took that 1024, rendered them out, and it, no problems. It loved it. So I've got my texture samples set up, and just a little bit of movement keys inside of here. My left mouse is my pan key. Left and right mouse together will actually dolly the camera in and out. And then if I want to move something by itself, I can just click on the object I want to move, hold down the control key, and then just move that one object without panning. Because if I don't hold down anything when I use the left mouse button, it's just going to pan my view. So I've got this set up. The next thing I want to do is I want to come in here to my material expressions, and I want to type in terrain. And even when I get to TERR, it's going to give me some tools that are only going to be used for terrain building for texture. So the ones that I'm going to be using is going to be the terrain weight. I'm going to be using a terrain weight for this. So I'm going to have one terrain weight for each one of my textures. So I've got a terrain weight. Let's get another one. Let's get these guys lined up a little bit, and I'll show you how to wire these guys up in just a second. This, and then terrain weight. Now there's something that's very interesting about this. You have to set this up in a certain way of labeling these things. If you don't, then when you go to use this texture as paintable layers, and this is if you're going to make your own painted texture, because we can actually use this technique to make a texture that has multiple pieces of itself inside of UDK. That one uses the world up or the world Z coordinates. That method is a nice method to use too. I don't personally like that method, not because it's not a good method, but for my own intents and purposes, I think that this method is actually robust enough. Oh Lord Jesus. I think this method is robust enough to get the things and the look and feel that I want out of UDK. I don't really see having to use the world up method. I guess one of the advantages of that is that you can basically set your textures up to for it to automatically know when you're on a slope. So when you're on that slope, your texture will change dependent upon the angle of your terrain. So if you had grass set up to only be in flat areas, it would only put grass in flat areas as you painted. It's a cool shader as well. I just personally don't use it, and it's really just more my own personal needs that I don't use it. There's really nothing. I have nothing against it. It's a little bit more set up to do, and that's one of the reasons why I don't use it. So because I don't like the amount of setup that it has at times, but it's still a very viable method to use as well. So you can come back in here, and remember, like I told you, you can only use your paintbrush with your paint layers. And I'll go back and paint some of this. And last thing in here, I'm going to go and paint myself a road. So I'm just going to come in here and paint myself a road. And hopefully this will speed up in a second. It always takes a second to switch between your textures because it's having to calculate that shader kind of over again. So it always takes a second or two to fire up before it just starts throwing out awesomeness for you. So I've got my road texture that I can kind of put in here. So I'm making this big road, and I can go get my green ground, get a bigger brush, and start painting in this green, the green grass of a home. The only problem is that the texture I have had this really weird anomaly in the middle of it, which was like this grate or something. So it wasn't the best texture to use for this, but it's just, I'm just doing this quick demo for you guys. I can go back and kind of get rid of that out of there, and put some of the snow in here, and get rid of those constant repeating patterns of that really weird thing that texture has. So hopefully this has helped. This is really how you would set this up, and you can, like I say, build it once and they will come. That's really all you have to do to build this guy out. Really what's wrong with this road texture right now is the same thing that was wrong with our other textures. It needs to be scaled properly, so that it lays out across my stuff properly. I'm just going to go back inside of my ground texture because it's kind of irking me. It's kind of bugging me. Just a little bit. Not much. Just a little bit bugging me. So I'm just going to go back in here and change this guy. And let's put this at, I don't know, same thing, like 10. Now one of the last things to talk about as I'm waiting for this to recalculate is you have to remember that all of these pieces and all the things that you're doing inside of UDK uses memory. So it's not like you get a free ride. It's not like you can just type in numbers that you want to type in, get stuff to shoot out however you want to shoot it out, and there's no consequences on your performance inside of a game because you're streaming in a lot of texture. So you need to, if you are working on this for a real video game, a real piece, you would have to tell this thing, okay, you'd have someone telling you, okay, you can only have this much texture space at any given time. So you need to make your textures appropriate. A lot of times we'll use it's a very old technique um, for games, which is called MIP mapping. MIP mapping is many in one, is really what it boils down to from the Latin. It's just many in one. And what you'll have is you'll have multiple versions of the same texture, and it might be a 2048 texture, but the game will decimate that texture and make you a 1024 texture, a 512 texture, a 256, and a 128 texture. So it'll take that texture and make multiple copies of the map and make smaller ones. The advantage of that is that at far away distances, when you're really far away from those textures, they can be relatively small because it doesn't matter. They're farther away from the camera. The draw distance is farther out. You have farther between you and that object, so you don't need to see it with like a full 2K res texture on it. Now, when you get close to it, it'll pop and change to the correct texture at close-up viewing angles. You probably have seen this a lot in video games where you'll see textures kind of pop on the characters and pop off of characters. That's really what's happening. It's being kind of manipulated, and it's it's a trick. It's a visual trick. That's all it is. Suffice to say, it is a visual trick. But you can see I've got my road, and with the normals, with everything set to the right levels, everything looks cool. I can put like a little base or something out here, and have my little road that leads me out here, and have my little people, and they're all happy, and they're like, "Yay! Look, we have a road." And last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to jump in and actually play test this. So I'm going to say play in viewport. And yeah, we know we updated materials, and say select all and resubmit and save, and then hit OK. And then when I load into my level, I am in my level, and I'm looking around inside of my level, and I think this is something else that could happen to you. You can see what's happening. I'm constantly dying. If you look at this in this view, we can see that I have this red line going through my world at the valley level. This is my kill zone. If I want to change the depth of my kill zone, all I have to do is come in here to view, go to world properties, and I'm going to go in here to zone info, and I'm going to set this kill. It's at 0 right now. I'm going to set this way below 0 so that I don't die the minute that I go into my world, because that's sad. That's sadness. I don't want to die when I go in my world. So I'm going to set this at like negative, ooh, not positive. Just joking. Just do this like negative 100,000 or something like that. And you can see my red line is gone, and I'll go back, and I won't test it in that viewport. I'm just going to test game out, and let's just test it, and I'll fall into my world, and you can see I am able to walk around inside of my world. I can see these nice huge vistas, and it's like, oh, look at this. Oh, it's gigantic. It's gigantic. And you can see this is only a 253 rather, about 253 patch of landscape. If you want it bigger, you can still add on to this. I don't think you would want much bigger than this, at least for a small little level. If you're trying to make it, you don't want to make it too large, because then you end up with more memory issues. One little thing I wanted to show you guys before we actually signed off is one thing that's really cool that UDK does. If you look at this right now, I'm looking at this actual material, and it shows me that it's in my package. It has 64 instructions, 10 texture samplers. Shows me when I created it. It shows me the status of it being loaded, but the package has not been saved. And then it also shows me how much memory this is using. So right now, this one material is using 26 megs of memory, which is not bad, but it's not great either. It's like it's like one big Photoshop file. So you have to keep that in mind, because you're going to have to compress these things down so that they fit well. Now remember, UDK will not bring in a JPEG, so you have to keep that in mind too. UDK has its own. It has its own. What am I trying to say? It has its own kind of pre-made um, compression stuff. So you don't really have to just go and compress them before you bring them in. Just know that UDK has its own little compression settings. It's going to compress stuff for you. And let's see if I can even get over here and use this Manta. It's so far away. Oh dear Lord Jesus, it's so far away. Oh dear baby Jesus. Dear 6 pounds, 7 ounce baby Jesus. It's all the way over here. Oh, I need to get in it. Oh, I need to get in it. And I'm in it. And you can see, I don't see a character in there because I'm still in testing mode. But you can see that my train actually works. I'm able to glide with it, fly around on it, do cool game stuff on it. Look at that. Look at all that gaming stuff I'm doing. Alright? Actually able to climb up this stuff. And that's pretty cool. It lets me, I can kind of, because I couldn't walk over here. It's just too high for me to walk. But you can see that I've got my little level built out. It all works. Even the guns work. The blasters and everything else work. And that's it for this tutorial. I will see you next time. Hopefully you have enjoyed working with the landscape inside of UDK. It's a pretty simple process, but kind of involved at the same time. If you have any questions, please leave them for me. You can leave them on my comment board at cstudiosinc.com. That is the letter C, studiosinc.com. And I am Domiko Cunningham, and you have a great day, and I'm signing off. Happy modeling.